Welcome, world. Welcome to Unboxing Stories. I'm your host, Tanmay K, and I'm thrilled to have you with us on this incredible journey through our professional spotlight series. This podcast is all about diving deep into the lives of professionals just like you, ambitious, hardworking, and aiming for the stars. Whether you're just starting out or well on your way, these stories are your stories.
You know how people always say, follow your heart or do what your inner self desires? Well, let's be real. It's not that easy in everyday life. I often wonder what really makes us tick, what drives us in our professional and personal lives as human beings. For me, it boils down to our beliefs, principles, and core values. These shape us, guide us, but sticking to them, that's a whole different ballgame. Take this example. You believe being eco friendly, and you know that taking public transport is better for the environment. But still, you find yourself choosing the car because, well, it's just more convenient. It's a constant juggling act, right? Now, today, we've got someone who truly embodies this courage to follow his principles. Our guest isn't just a genius in his field, and trust me, I don't use that word lightly. He's written books, lived on three different continents, has an impressive academic record, has a bachelor's degree, master's degree, and a bunch of research papers. But here is where it gets really fascinating. He was halfway through his PhD program at one of the world's most prestigious university when he decided to walk away. Why? To follow his heart and make a direct impact on society by working for a cause he truly believes in. This guy is just not a brilliant mind. He's somebody I deeply respect, and I'm proud to call him a friend. He's an adventurous, fun loving, and just all around great person to hang out with. So buckle up and get ready for an inspiring conversation. Please join me in welcoming Bhargav. Welcome, Bhargav Srinivasan.
Hi, Tanmay Netke. That's a very kind introduction of you. Thanks for having me. You are a dear friend, and I'm happy to be here.
Let's start with your journey, right? Can you give us a quick run through of your journey so far?
Cool. When you were saying that, I was wondering how early I start. I think I'll just very briefly give like a little bit about my childhood. I was born in the south of India, Hyderabad, and quite young, moved to the US and stayed there for my early childhood. And in 2004, 5, moved back to India, and then went to my undergrad at BITS, where we met back in 2013. My undergrad was in computer science, though I did do two minors. One was in philosophy, economics, politics, and the other was in English studies. So I had it was funny. I had about like 16 computer science courses, which was the minimum I had to do. And I had 14 humanities and social science courses. So like my degree was almost like a half and half in that sense. And I guess that was very important for me because I always like to be in touch with that side. What started off as a kind of interest in English literature moved into political science, sociology, and philosophy. This is also when Tanmay and I were in the Mime Club, which is quite a lovely memory. And I finished my degree early as well. It's a 4-year degree, but I finished in 3 years and then moved to France, to Lille in the north of France, to India and CNRS, which are the national research laboratories. I started there doing statistical machine learning research. So quite mathematical, theoretical, and trying to write Python code that works with it. At this time, I got quite a bit into open source programming as well. Back when I was at BITS, I cleared Google Summer of Code, GSOC, 2 times. And so I was contributing a lot to open source machine learning, data science communities. But the whole time, my kind of interest was how we can use these kinds of tools on social data. I was quite interested in, I guess, just cultures and communication. So text and networks, if in some way, if you can think of all communication can be structured in some sense as text and networks, as that's how humans tend to do it. And what I was interested at, even while I was doing this machine learning or more theoretical computer science research, was how this relates to, I guess, society. But I wasn't very political. I wasn't very actively political in the way I didn't have a prescriptive or moralistic view on how society should be. I kind of had this view of, we're all and I still do have this view in some ways, but we're all complex human beings with our stories and our journeys, and no one's perfect. So I just wanted to better understand this. I didn't really have an idea of like this is what's wrong and this is where things should be. I just wanted to understand this. So that's when. So also when I was in France in those two times, I was continuing contributing a lot to open source. I was doing a lot of Python conferences, teaching, doing tutorials on how people can use Python from all kinds of backgrounds, like natural scientists, social scientists, journalists. I was also writing my first book at that point, which was on an introduction to natural language processing. So I was kind of enjoyed being this educator in between computer science and the social sciences. So I know you said quick run through, and I'm just going for it, but
No, it's okay. Maybe one thing that I would like to know, you decided to do your bachelor's in computer science. So was it a conscious decision? Why did you choose computer science in the first place?
I chose computer science largely because I had been programming for a while since I was quite young, maybe since about like 13 years old. So as part of my schooling curriculum, like high school, middle school curriculum. And yeah, I just enjoyed it. I knew how to do it. I loved video games. I played a lot of video games growing up. Before joining my undergrad, I wanted to be like a video game designer, and I thought programming because I love the idea of creating new worlds,
Mm-hmm.
which in a way is kind of what my work now does, so, like, but real worlds in a sense. But back then, I would say I just knew how to program. I liked it. I liked it more than any of the other subjects. It felt even back then I applied to like dual programs in the social sciences and computer science because I was always quite good at English and sociology, like English literature. So, but my interest in computer science was, yeah, I mean, I like video games and I didn't like mechanical, for example. I didn't like physics so much. So I liked kind of logical thinking. I liked working through complex problems as well. And computer science allowed me to do that. I do think, though, that young, it's really tough to say what you're into.
Right.
And I do think it's a bit unfair to make, like, honestly, children basically decide what their future is going to be. As in, I know your journey as well, Tanmay, and how it's kind of stayed and moved. But yeah, it's tough to predict what you want to do when you're that young. But those were kind of some of my motivations for computer science.
Yeah, it's fascinating how life's unexpected turns can lead to better fulfillments, right? So that's
Yeah.
what it happened with you. And your bachelor's was in computer science, and clearly you excelled at it. It wasn't like you chose computer science, but you were like, this is not what I want to do, but you were very good at it. So the interest in social science itself, when did it really develop, and why? Why you touched upon it briefly, what excited you, but when did this interest develop that you chose to just change your career trajectory? Because the normal path for someone who studied computer science, let's say in India, is you do your bachelor, so you go on to work, or you go for masters in the US, where you have really top universities in the world excelling in the field of computer science, and then you just take up a job over there. But you kind of chose this unconventional path. So where exactly you had this moment of realization?
Yeah. So I was quite lucky actually at BITS to be able to do so many social science and humanities courses. Though at that point, I hadn't quite made the connection between computer science and social sciences. There were kind of two different worlds for me. There was my computer science world, and there was my social science world. In general, the idea. So it's quite also linked to a story of my personal politics, which go quite hand in hand in this. Back when I was studying the social sciences at BITS at my undergrad, it was just more from a curiosity. I just really liked learning more about what have people thought about how society should be structured, and also this idea that you can change things. Like, I didn't like the idea. I felt that there were a lot of problems in society, especially I mean, anyone who has, but most parts of the world have lots of structural problems, but especially growing up in India and in the US, two countries that have extreme social wealth inequality, where there's some, you have Mumbai have some, and New York have some of the richest people in the world, but also the poorest, most downtrodden people. So I think in general, an idea of trying to figure out like why is it that we have structure? We obviously have the ability, we have enough things in the world, but why doesn't everybody have some kind of way to access these things? That is also a question of sociology and philosophy. It's a question of wealth. It's a question of how resources are distributed across society. It's a question of how we choose as humans to organize ourselves, and also a question of history as what have we as a species, how have we organized ourselves. So I was always interested in these things on a kind of, and the classes and bits could help understand whether it's psychology or social theory or philosophy could help understand some of these things, of these kind of broader societal questions. But it was when, after I finished, when I was doing my undergrad, when I was doing my research in France on the statistical learning stuff, I realized that I can understand this and I can work with it, but I can't quite master it. And it's not exactly what I'm very, very good at. So I did
Mhm.
not want to do, and as for the question of not wanting to work at a corporate, I was just, money was not something that ever really drove, was never really a driving factor in my life. I didn't have any like a life of a younger childhood of luxury by any means, but I've always been, been able to go to bed with my stomach full and have a comfortable home to be in. But I never really wanted more as such. And I didn't have any financial responsibility towards my parents or my family in terms of, oh, I have to, look out for their retirement, which is a big luxury, as I know a lot
Yeah.
of people have to take care of their families. So I didn't have to take care of my family, and I was young and I was curious. So I didn't want to do something just because everyone else does it or because this is what people do. I've never really felt like I was never driven by that. I was more driven by, I think, curiosity and a kind of drive to better understand the world and, if possible, do something about it. And that gave me the luxury to be able to do research and move to France. Um, but it was in France when I realized that the research I was doing, which was the more computer science research, was not what was really exciting for me. I also started, and this is why I earlier briefly mentioned politics. I was also in France where, 2016 was a time of many world elections as well. It was
Mhm.
the year Donald Trump came into power. It was the year Brexit happened, and it was in general a year when there was a lot of big political changes happening, and it didn't seem to me like they were going in the right direction.
Mhm.
That's when
Mhm.
I kind of started questioning, I guess, politics and society and structure more.
That was going to be my question, because I think France and India are totally different in terms of where they are in terms of industrial development. But at the same time, France is a country which I believe is where citizens itself are very much involved into the political scenarios of the country, very active, are very open about their unhappiness about what government does, happy about what government does. So does that also
Absolutely.
affect you? Did it affect you somehow?
Totally. 100%. Yeah, no, that's spot on. Yeah, so in India, I often feel that we just have this kind of feeling that this is how things are and this is how things will be. There's not much we can do about it. So let's just try and get on within the system the best way we can.
Right.
And that's just how I've always kind of felt things were like in India, that I didn't really have. But France, like you said, not to get me wrong, I mean, we also had an imperial revolution where we threw over the British.
Right.
So we had the ultimate revolution, if anything. But we did, I feel like politically we've kind of stagnated since then, which has been kind of disappointing. And in the context of France, of course, they have lots of structural political problems, like I guess most of the world, but they do have a very thriving protest culture. They have a culture to question the status quo. They Yeah, they also have a culture of revolution in many ways.
Mm.
And I lived in a house with 7 French people for my time in France, so I some of that definitely did rub off on me. This thought and being influenced in France, already having studied a lot of social sciences and philosophy, and being good in computer science, and the fact that around this time, a new kind of discipline in the since 2016-17 started to emerge. This discipline was called computational social science, and it's a field that I mean, it's been around. There have been like early works since maybe, I mean, since complex system studies, so like since 50s, 60s, of course. But in the modern version of it, this discipline started to emerge in about 2015 onwards, and which is the use of machine learning and data science to understand social phenomena,
Mhm.
or in the
Mhm.
other flip side, using social theory to critique computing and data.
Right.
So you kind of you philosophize and think like, oh, what is the effect of mobile phones on humans? So you go like you use social science to critique computer science, or you use computer science to understand social science. But there's a rich field just starting to form. And the University of Chicago had a master's program in computational social science, and I applied for that master's, and I got 100% scholarship,
Wow.
and it was a no-brainer for me to go there, especially given that master's programs are very expensive for most people, and the University of Chicago is a top 10 school worldwide, and especially in what I do. And I think that was a real turning point, to be able to, having already studied all this computer science and social sciences, having already written a book, two GSOCs, multiple programming experience conferences, research papers at top venues, uh, gave me the confidence. I think having proved my competence, I also, gave up. You talked about those Microsoft,
Right.
Google. I
Right.
gave up. I gave up one of those jobs in Bangalore, paying me a lot of money to. So I already felt I had nothing to prove to anybody. I was like, okay, I'm already a highly capable computer scientist. So that, I guess, give me the strength to be able to make the decision to study like a master's. It was an MA, it was a master's of arts. So yeah, I think so. There is, if I were to pat myself on the back, yeah, there is some level of, I guess, kind of bravery, or it's a kind of decision you're making when you're not sure how things will go. But also, I did have a lot of support, privilege, and I didn't have anything to prove. So I guess that gave me the ability to make such a decision.
It's first of all very refreshing to see someone who studied computer science choose this path, because it's uncharted territory, right? No, usually, as we spoke, people just take up these jobs which are highly paid, and for, of course, obvious reasons, that they are well paid, your life is set, kind of, and then you just climb the ladder within those jobs in that corporate world, and you had an option. So it's very refreshing, at the same time very admiring, to see that you were very clear in your head when you decided to go for this program in the US, that this is how you want to see your competence or your expertise used for the betterment of this society, humanity. And you sort of started to gain the tools, so to say, by doing the masters, just exposing yourself to the ideas of social science that you were not aware of. And you became, you were already an expert in computer science, but you started to become an expert in this circle of social science as well, and with a clear intention to use it for betterment of the society. So it's just refreshing, first of all, and admiring what you did. So cheers to that. And I'm very happy and proud of you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Tanmay. I also have to say that you've seen me about almost throughout this journey, and it's a cheesy line, but I couldn't have done it without all my friends always supporting me and giving me the courage to do what I do. So thank you as well.
So after your masters in the US, I'm sure you must have had a lot of opportunities to work and continue working in the US, but you decided to go for a PhD. Why? That's the first question. And secondly, why Europe?
I didn't really have any financial responsibilities, and in terms of, just to be clear, like I don't really have a lot of money from my parents or anything. It was just more that I didn't need a lot to survive. I mean,
Right.
I had, my rent wasn't very expensive. I was making just enough money with research projects and TAing, that I could, pay for my food and enjoy a party or some small travels now and then. I don't have an extremely extravagant lifestyle or needs in that sense. So keeping that in mind, keeping the lack of my long-term financial responsibilities, and like my younger brother was doing fine. He had gone to UIUC for his undergrad, another great school, and my parents, because they were both employed, they were also fine. So this allowed me once again to kind of be brave and not really think about my need to make money. I knew that, what's more important is I do what feels, I guess, right. which is in
Mm.
line with my broader morals, but which is also interesting to me. It's really important for me to be doing interesting things which I just find fast, like whether if that's being a musician, which is still a kind of dream, like for me, whether it's being involved in activism or whether it's being a computer science researcher, like I just had to enjoy what I was doing. So that keeping all of that in mind, I thought a PhD makes sense. I really like research. There is a strong need for highly educated STEM people in politics. You can imagine in the context of technology, and I briefly want to mention this when you're thinking of, as a lot of people who are listening to this might also be somehow working in science and technology. So science and technology is not just objective, right? It's a socially constructed thing. Like, of course, there are some facts to the fact, like this glass is some silicon oxide kind. There are like these kinds of things, but how things get funded, what kind of things are given priority to be researched,
Right.
and as well as the fact that we cite other humans who have other physical world labs who do experiments. When we know how people are, there's science is a human endeavor, and it's a social endeavor. And the things we decide to prioritize as a species is also an extremely social thing because it's financial, and there's no like blind logic to this. It's a socially created enterprise. So at the same time, right now we are in a situation with modern technology, especially in the context of computer science, AI, data computing, that most fundamental science is being driven by companies, by firms, by corporations, also by profit-driven corporations. None of these are doing these for the good of the world. OpenAI tried for like a year before becoming like pretty horrible in terms of their politics and contributions. So it's really, and it's also because we live in a system that's heavily profit driven. So in a heavily profit driven system, if the only direction of science and technology is being driven by money, that's pretty scary. That if the bottom line is the only thing that's driving the direction of progress, there should be some kind of to the direction to the way we decide to do science and technology. So I thought that working in core computer science with this kind of moral view would be helpful. So there were all these kinds of views going on, and joining a corporation didn't make sense at all from all of that perspective. I had these broader political missions to do this, and that was to kind of make technology help people. Make if there is a massive technological product or innovation or boom, which is really important for society, then everyone has deserves to benefit from that, not just those who are paid for it, or not just if we all have a big cancer treatment, that shouldn't be limited to just the very rich, right? So um, I felt that the benefits of technology must be shared in a way that everyone benefits. So that I felt doing that can either come from working in policy or politics, or in like massive economic systems, and couldn't do that immediately. The other way was to influence fundamental research. So a PhD made sense.
Right.
Earlier, the reason I brought up failure in that context was because of your question of why Europe. The failure was me so after I finished my 2 years master's at Chicago, I worked for 1 year as a researcher and teacher and writer. I was writing my second book, which is still continuing to write, called Thinking with Deep Learning, which is a book on deep learning and AI applied to the natural and social sciences. I was co-authoring this with Professor James Evans from the University of Chicago. While I was writing this book and researching and teaching, I was also applying to PhD programs. And I had applied to many American schools. But the mistake I did in my application process was I only applied to the top 5, top 7 schools in the US. And I I think my being in between two disciplines, like computer science and social science, or in general, whatever two disciplines you are in, can be quite difficult sometimes because neither really accept you as being part of their discipline. So when you're applying for a PhD program, you have to apply to like either a sociology department or a computer science department, or you have to apply to a department. Often there are some interdisciplinary departments, but the computer scientists are like, he's a little bit too much of a sociologist or philosopher kind of, and the philosophers and social scientists are like, he's actually too much of a computer scientist. And I should have, in hindsight, I would have applied quite differently to a PhD program. I would have applied for one where I was also a bit unsure exactly what the direction of my research was. I had like a lot of different varied interests, and I was good at a variety of things. But as someone who's done a PhD, you would know that you need to have like a very, very clear, precise kind of thing you're focusing on, right? And I think my PhD applications were, despite having a very impressive profile, I think they were quite vague in what I wanted to do. And that year was a bit rough because it was the year which COVID happened, 2020, 2021. And a lot of the schools which I were applying to, which I really wanted to get into, like one of them was Princeton Sociology Department, they refused any applications that year. They basically said COVID has affected our funding and we'd rather focus on the students we have than accept any new students. And a lot of other universities basically would, if they would have hired 3 students, they only hired 1. And in the year in which everything is uncertain, hiring someone like me, who is an in between kind of situation, is not a good strategy for them. It's better to get a really good computer scientist or a really good social scientist. So I basically did not, the reason I didn't stay in the US was I didn't get into any of the 7 programs I applied to in the US. Luckily, it didn't terribly matter. It did, of course, change a lot of my social life. A lot of friendships, relationships, which had to be changed around because of me moving to Europe away from Chicago, a place I got very fond of. And the reason was because of this PhD program, which at EPFL, which is École Polytechnique Fédérale de Lausanne. It's the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. It's got very, very impressive computer science program. We extremely high quality research output, top class professors matching most top US universities. And yeah, it was just one of the top schools I could apply to. And they had a very generous funding package, which PhD students normally don't get, very generous funding. So it was one of the European schools which I'd got into. And it was the best European school I'd got into by far. And it was a very good funding package. My topic of study then was Wikipedia. And Wikipedia is a nice example of something that is both computer science and social science, scientific, right? So the topic did make sense in a way. And I was studying the kind of social and technical aspects of Wikipedia. So I joined EPFL, and because it was the best offer I had among the offers I applied to, I was a PhD in computer science. EPFL is very reputed for computer science. So that was my decision for moving to EPFL.
It does speaks volume about your ambition and curiosity to continue your journey of learning and expertise. So cheers to that. And secondly, also again quite admiring that you're again now entering into an uncharted territory and being brave to leave your life behind in the US, which you spend so much time in building and putting in all the efforts. As you said, a lot of relationships had to change because you were going now to Switzerland again and starting from scratch. So again, a brave decision. So must have been difficult. Now coming to the point of realization, when did you decide, well, this is not what I should be doing?
Yeah, it's our Switzerland story has a common thread, doesn't it, Tanmay? You've seen me in a lot of it, as you live not so far from me in Bern. So yeah, Switzerland it's a curious place, isn't it? It's beautiful, like really, really stunning. There were 2 factors which made me think that this isn't for me. I mean, for the program itself, it's a very good program. I mean, it's similar structure to the US ones, where you spend 2 years doing coursework and a combination of shared research, and then you have 3 more years after that. So it's a 5 to 6 year program, which is different from other European programs. And it's just very swanky place. They have the money, they have the ability to attract researchers. And so one thing which kind of felt a bit off for me just as I reached was I had come from a very interesting radical situation in Chicago, where I was studying social sciences and computer science, and being able to really work in a very interdisciplinary way, in a way which I was also in a way where I could really keep in touch with my politics. I was involved in things with the student union, different activism locally in Chicago, and that also informed the way I would think about things in computer science, and the kind of what futures do we want. And moving to Switzerland, I felt quite restrained. It's a very famously politically neutral place. They don't want you to do any politics. They like the way things are, even if it has a lot of structural issues, and they just want it to continue to be that way. So it's not a place that encourages active politics, especially by a person who's not a Swiss citizen. So I was immediately felt that I should, be quiet compared to the kind of thinking I was allowed to do before. My lab and my professor, despite both being extremely competent and very very good at what they do and very supportive as well the whole time. I was very very well supported by my program, and I was also doing decently well. But I did feel a disconnect and sense of purpose. But I was really interested in kind of more structural economic critiques, more structural, maybe societal critiques about like race or gender or class, and those kinds of things I wasn't really allowed to explore the way I wanted to be encouraged. Coming from Chicago, where that was like, it was not only encouraged, one of the best places to do that kind of stuff. I went to an environment where I had to kind of be a lot more. I felt like my full creativity and all my social science education wasn't able to shine in EPFL. It's
Mm-hmm.
also a PhD in computer science.
Recognizing when to pivot is a valuable skill, and better late than never, right? So that's the message, and it takes a lot of courage to make such a decision, especially if you have worked so hard to get this in the first place, because it's very difficult to get into such programs. So that's one thing, and to let go of this must have taken a lot of courage and a lot of thinking.
Yeah, one thing it would be a miss for me to not say is I also met my partner, the love of my life, in when I was in Switzerland, and she lived in London. And one of the things that drew me to her was Surebs is the head of politics at Greenpeace UK, and she is like very smart, very talented. Was very inspired meeting her and seeing that she and a lot of her friends as well were all very very driven, smart, talented people, like very very good at what they did, like studied at the best places, worked at the best, they were experts and quite bold, hardworking people, and almost all of them were working in like as activists or
Mhm.
as in the social sector in civil society. And I was like, wow, these are like, you never see that if you spend most of your time in like science, technology,
Right.
management kind of spaces. People are quite like career focused. Seeing her friends who are living, it's tough, right? I mean, you're taking a big pay cut, taking a lot of uncertainty, and you're sacrificing a lot to do these kinds of jobs, right? Like, it's not easy to do these kinds of stuff, I think, especially if you have the ability to get similar kind of very well paying job
Mhm.
in a different with the same skills. And I think I didn't have any example of people like this in my life. I just did not know anybody. So then I started thinking like, oh, how can I as a computer scientist actually like directly help? I think my perspective really shifted then. I was more like, okay, I have these skills now, like I need to somehow use these skills in a way that directly benefits people. In a way where I felt that, like, for example, making money and donating can't quite do, I think, in the same way. I want to like do the thing. Then decided to move to London, and I got very lucky through a connection to meet Carsten Young, who is a senior economist at the Institute for Public Policy Research, which is a think tank, which is where I work right now as a senior research fellow at IPPR, working on the same question I was telling you before of how can we make AI work for everybody and not
Mhm.
just for big tech. 9 to 10 months now working in the midst of this. It's been pretty crazy time. We've had like two papers, two high, like very well received reports on AI policy come out. We've had like insane media coverage. Like lots of people really want to know about the work which we do. I've been lucky enough to be on like BBC Radio, primetime talk TV.
Wow.
I will be on. I was on interviewed by Financial Times a few weeks ago, and lots of print publications as well. And yeah, it feels really special to be able to do that.
Your commitment to these positive changes is commendable and quite impressive. How you're using your skills for societal good.
Thank you, thank you
What's
so much.
what's next for you? But what's your vision and how you are working towards it?
I mean, in all of this, I have to say it's also all new ground for me. I mean, I'm also doing this for the first time, discovering all this for the first time, seeing where the path goes, trying to be bold, but kind of also going with the flow. I don't want to, hold myself back, especially when so many new things are happening. Well, one thing is to understand like more and more about this infrastructure of how AI and society. For example, I also work with lawyers on when big tech corporations have committed different kind of crimes breaking the law and they know what they're doing most of the time. They just try to pretend that they don't. So trying to give accountability, like democratic accountability against the kind of issues which big tech have led to in society. So I work with lawyers in providing technical evidence. So now I have this kind of idea of how the legal side of AI and policy, and it's been really powerful with some high impact cases working with lawyers on this. I've worked with EU regulators on how should recommendation systems be structured. What are the kind of about how open this construction of recommendation systems should be, kind of legal and policy frameworks around that as well. I will also be working, hopefully, on the environmental impact of AI, and how to manage the huge electricity, data, water costs of AI with the benefits it may give us as a society. So I'm like learning about all and also very, very crucially, workers' rights and AI. I just want to learn more and more about this space. Keep trying to put bold ideas out there that hopefully challenge the status quo and make. I think right now that at least like it's different in the context of say environmental policy where we kind of know what. Of course, there are lots of practical problems, but we do kind of know some of the things which we have to do with environmental policy. It's just like the political action needs to happen, which is much easier said than done. But I think in the context of AI policy, it's a little less certain of what kind of futures we want. So I don't claim to say that I know what the answers are or I absolutely know how things should be. And how we go there, the process is going to matter a lot, as well as the end goal, like where we are now and where we go and how we're going to get there. So I think right now what I'm really interested in is just fleshing out the processes, fleshing out what it'll actually take to go there, to go to our end goal, and like learning more about this. And I'm not in a hurry to like learn about this in a hurry. I need to really immerse myself in this. So in a practical way, what that looks like is continue to do research, advocacy, writing, educating in this space. I also plan to maybe apply for a part-time PhD program as well, because I have a lot of research experience, and I think to lead research projects at a very senior level, often you need a PhD if it's going to be a very specialized research thing. And I just think that a full-time PhD is not for me though, as it requires me to focus on other things which I'm not so interested in. But luckily, the UK has a lot of really interesting part-time PhD programs. Almost most universities have them, which is quite different actually. And I think I'm going to take advantage of that. So, like practically, what it might mean is finally get that PhD, even if I dropped out of the one I didn't, and do it in one where I feel 100% on board. Continue to work at IPPR if they'll have me around on the same things I'm working on. Continue to work with researchers and workers and just people in the space. So I just want to get immersed and do my best. I mean, I have of course more kind of practical, smaller ambitions. I have like, oh, I want to get this. But I want to I guess I want to help. I want to help in the space in whatever way I can. So I will continue to work on that.
Your vision does sound exciting. I wish you good luck on that. All the best with your
Thank you.
future goals. I have an interesting one for you now. Let me ask you this. If you had to give an advice to yourself when you were 18 years old, knowing how things are right now, personally, and how the world has developed now, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Good one. I think I would probably say, I mean, I'm kind of, I feel very lucky to be able to say I would not have changed much in my life because I'm really grateful for where I am. I'm really, really grateful for where I am. I guess I would just say, like, be easier on yourself, be kinder on yourself. I'm pretty harsh to myself, can be really self-critical. And I think I went through some tough times with a lot of self-doubt as well. So I would just say trust the process and take it easy. Yeah. And maybe I would say I would have wanted to read. I would have wanted to read some more critical philosophy stuff, and maybe even read Marx a bit earlier in my life. Actually, it's a bit of a weird thing to say, but then I think it doesn't really matter. It's only a few years later, and 6 or 7 years after I was 18, when I started thinking more deeply. But yeah, just take it easy.
Yeah, take it easy. You're gonna be on podcast with Tanmay, so life is gonna be
Yeah,
life is gonna
yes.
be good. That's a valuable advice. It clearly, I mean, shows that your experience have given you the maturity and a lot of wisdom to think about how you want to carry yourself in your life. So, as we come to the end of the podcast, this is something that I ask every guest. The podcast is called Professional Spotlight Series. I would like to know if you had to put three spotlights on your journey in the past, in the present, or one that you anticipate in the future or you hope for in the future, what would these three spotlights be?
I think my first real turning point, despite being very lucky to have had the life I had till I was about 24, 25, and like always, I think I was always very open to things. I think what really changed me was when I was in University of Chicago, and I was already good at doing computer science, so that needed to happen. But I think it was my like reading my first kind of critical social science stuff and meeting my housemate Andrew, who introduced me to a lot of these thinkers from a philosophical and historical perspective and economical perspective, and just discovering it was like a mind blowing moment for me actually, because I was like, whoa, I didn't realize that it's possible to understand how the world is structured and break it down and try to make it better. And that kind of thinking only comes from like I think deeply studying sociology, philosophy, history, and economics. And that was a real like eyes opening moment, which really changed everything in terms of the way I was structuring my career goals. Like I was
Mhm.
definitely, I was like, whoa, like this is that, and realizing that I want to get involved in that. And that was really, I think, mind blowing. From my present life, like about things that are happening right now. I mean, just I guess very recently I left my PhD, right? Like just 9, 10 months ago. And seeing how that decision or that risk has paid off in more ways than I can say. Like I feel I have to pinch myself to think like, whoa, like I am working in public policy for AI. Like that yeah, that's really that I'm able, and like even the other stuff I'm doing, whether it's about working with lawyers or working on the environmental impact, I'm like, whoa, I like these are things I care about, and I'm able to
Mm.
do it. I have a long way to go, and even now I'm in a bit of a transition position situation, and but I'm just like, whoa, it's all paying off. So it's all like this, and I need to keep doing what I'm doing, and that was like gives me energy. That so if every decision so far has paid off in unexpected ways. There's been a lot of difficult times as well throughout all of the stories of like straight up depression or feeling like it's not going to happen. So that's something about right now. So I guess that yeah, it's just like that moment could be like anytime randomly at work, just thinking, okay, I'm actually doing this. Wow, okay. So and then sometime in the future, yeah, tough to say. I don't know. I think I there's something masochistic about being in a PhD program once. I still want to get it though. I'm like, like I was co-author on a paper it published in Nature this year. Like I should have a PhD. I need to be a better writer. I need to like improve my writing. I think it's my 1 week sport which I have, like my academic or philosophical writing, and I need to find my voice. Like my yeah, I need to find my writing. I just need to find my voice. I think I'm like doing things, but I need to find my voice, and I think a spotlight I'd like to see myself having in the future is having got my doctorate from a university which I feel excited about, and having done research that I feel proud about, and having been advised by somebody who I'm like, this is great. So that would be really cool. I don't know if it'll happen. That would be a let's see.
I'm sure it will. So far, you have been very determined about things that you want to achieve from your life, and I'm sure this is also something that you eventually will conquer. And these key moments really show the impact that they had on your journey, and the aspirations that you have for future really show how you want to shape yourself going forward to achieve your goals. So really exciting to know. I said this was the last question, but I just had one more thing before we leave, because based on the answer that you gave, you said a lot of challenges that you faced and you struggled quite a lot, and you used the word depression. I want to know, when you go through these phases of very, very difficult times and immensely challenging times, how do you fight them? How do you take care of yourself and get on top of these difficult situations?
Yeah, I wish I I wish I had like silver bullet. I guess it's kind of boring, boring in the sense of like lots of sleep, good food, exercise are like the things your mom or your therapist will tell you. Basically, true, right? Like I think doing those things gets you. I think those are the things you need to do. Really, like just kind of ground yourself. Find whatever activity that is that grounds yourself. I'm not saying I'm good at that. But that's what I know I should do.
And
Right?
no
Like
alcohol and drugs.
no alcohol, no alcohol. Well, well, I mean, different kinds of people have different ways of doing self care, and obviously things like alcohol and drugs can be just a distraction. But I'm
Right,
not going to. There are ways to incorporate whatever you want to in your life and still have self care. So I
right,
think just knowing what is the limit and knowing what self care is for you. Obviously, apart from that, things like just it always feels like it's never going to be better when you're in the moment, right? It always
Mhm.
feels hopeless in the moment. I think just like reminding yourself of the big picture that it'll be fine,
Yeah.
that it has
Yeah.
always kind of worked out, that it's that, and that's tough because it can feel really quite hopeless. But I think that even then, like regardless of the how it turns out, it's fine. It's like worth it. Like
Mm,
life's worth living. Life isn't a list of even the depressions are these were not all related to my career as such. Like these are more
right,
related to like the general state of the world
right.
or my relationships or my friends. Like like different. It's not like I had an aspiration and I failed and that's why I have a depression. But can be a variety of things. But I think in all of those situations, just remembering that the way it feels in the moment is not how it always feels. Doing basic self care, investing in friends, friends and family, doing things you like, getting a therapist. Uh,
I think it's also part of the journey of knowing yourself well, right? Because if you are into these situations and you come out on top of this, you know yourself better. You know how you got into them in the first place, and you try to avoid them in future. So it's always fascinating for me to know from other people how they deal with this situation. So something that I can learn from, and also people listening to this can use these tools. Thanks a lot for being gracious with your time. This has
yeah,
been a lot of fun for me personally, and
yeah,
I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure people listening to this will also find this very insightful. We covered a lot of topics, and thank you so much.
thank you. I miss you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me just talk. I guess. And yeah, yeah. Thank you.
It was like a little therapy session for you.
It actually was nice. Also it's nice to reflect because I don't really think of this like that, I guess. So thank you for giving me the space.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Unboxing Stories Professional Spotlight Series. I hope you found today's discussion as inspiring and insightful as I did. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback keeps our passion alive and helps us reach more incredible listeners like you. Thanks for listening. I'm Tanmay K, and I look forward to having you join us again for our next episode where we will feature another fascinating professional. Until then, keep striving, keep thriving, and keep unboxing your story. Until then, goodbye.